So good evening, everybody. My name is Samir Mathur, and just to introduce myself before I introduce the speaker, I head the NCR Delhi NCR chapter for FDPI, and today Naavi sir has given this mic to me because I guess this event today is arranged by our chapter, Delhi NCR chapter. So to come to Sukhpal, Sukhpal represents an organization called Classify, which is about classification of data. So I think this is the best introduction that I can give over the company. Classify as a company is about, I guess, 6 years old, and it's part of a larger organization which is more than almost 30 years old. I would like to add that the organization to which Classify belongs is called ACPL, which launched their first indigenous antivirus product in India, some maybe 32 years old, called Smart Dog. It became a very, very big hit in without all over the country. But anyway, coming back to Classify. So Classify, Sukhpal is one of the founding members, 6 years old. Sukhpal's total experience is about 25, 26 years. Sukhpal, this group is a foundation of independent members. All the agenda bottom line is that everybody is interested in learning about data privacy as a subject, and there are some people. Most of us here are very senior, experienced people. Most of us are from IT and security background, but yes, there are some people from legal side also. So it's a mix of the right kind of people. And over to you, and please introduce yourself and start the session. One more thing is that Sukhpal has kindly consented that people, whoever has a question during his presentation, can raise a hand and ask the question, because during our last recordings that I was seeing, I've seen some people raising their hand, and at the end, if the question, time for question comes, they either forget the question or they are busy in something else. So this time I requested Sukhpal, is it possible to ask the questions, although it disturbs the flow, I know. But then I think that it will help everybody if the question can be asked during the point that has been raised, by raising your question, your hand, and then we can interrupt Sukhpal at the right moment and take it forward from there, right? So thank you, and I give the stage now to Sukhpal to start his presentation.
So thank you so much, Smith sir. It's really, appreciated to giving me this opportunity to, be in the company of such esteemed, experts. Naavi sir, being the legend, I think I'm really honored to be, sharing the screen with him and all of you, right? So as Smith sir said, my name is Sukhpal Singh Sandhu. In the industry for quite some time. My total experience is almost 2.5 decades, right? And I'm a CSSP, I'm a CDPSC, I'm a ISMS lead auditor, and so I have been throughout my entire career, right? Have been in the the cybersecurity domain, right? And wear the different hats. We have done a product development, been the consultant, been the auditor, right? And being a virtual CISO of a couple of global organizations, right? And helping organizations globally to help them define their data security programs, help them audit that, help them take to a next maturity level, right? And and under this venture of ours, Classified Technology, we started in around 2014, and with the the clear thought of helping the enterprises to address the very typical challenge of identification of their business critical data, classification of their business critical data, and moving to the protection of their business critical data, right? Because most of the organization, right, and nowadays with a lot of digitization which has happened, right, so there's a huge volume of data, but identification of the critical data from the non-critical data is definitely a big challenge. And and now the lot of new regulations which are coming up, which are all data centric, right? Even the more focus is going into the internal internal data of a specific organization, or be specific regulations or some compliance related data, and so on and so forth. Let me quickly share my screen and start the presentation. Okay, so Mr. quick confirmation, the screen is visible, right?
Yeah, screen is visible, Sukhpal.
And I am loud and clear.
Yes, you are fine.
Okay. So as you all are really expert in the subject of data privacy, and there's a lot more really great work which under the guidance of and the leadership of Mr. Naavi and the other team members, right, that is happening on the India's own PDP bill, right, which will be passed very soon in the parliament, right. So I'm not going to talk about again on the PDP bill and what it contains and what it talks about and what is the PD or SPD or CPDs and all those fundamentals, which absolutely you all are very, very well versed with that. So I thought of including doing this session on some sharing some practical experience, especially on the approach side, right? Which I have experienced, I've learned, and this entire, then we have whatever platform we are building, right? This learning has been incorporated on that, right? And so what I'm going to talk about is a 5-stage approach, which any organization and any consultant, so whosoever is going to work on setting up the data privacy program, so they can follow that, and it'll give them a good base for them to work on. A disclaimer: so all these thoughts which I'm going to present are our own as an organization, right? And you might agree on that, you might not agree on that, our approach, but definitely. So I want to highlight a disclaimer. It's not industry specific. It is our own experience or our own wisdom that I'll be sharing with you, right? Okay, so I've given my introduction. Sukhpal Singh Sandhu, and I'm the one of the co-founder and director at Classify Technology. So I'm a CSSP, in fact, one of the first 25 CSSPs in India, right? I did way back when it was a really, a 6-hour long exam used to be there, and I'm certified on privacy, and I'm ISMS auditor, and a lot of other accreditation that I have done. Okay, let's proceed. See, what is happening in the organization is that I was just mentioning that organizations, because of the digitization and all this new introduction of application and so much new technologies which are coming up, right? So there's a huge, humongous growth of data which is happening in the organizations globally, right? And which is is growing at such a fast pace that it is becoming a challenge also to the organizations, right? And because of so many regulation and so many new compliances which are coming up, right? And it is becoming even more important for the organizations to to manage this data more effectively, right? And the moment it comes to the the data in the organizations, right? So generally, we divide that into 3 major formats in which the data exists in the organizations, right? So one we call the structured data, right? And second one is called the semi-structured data, and the third one is called the unstructured data, right? So I'll be quickly touching base on this. So structured data is the one which is which, as the name suggests, is that very well there's a structure around it, right? So that is in the form which is there in our databases, right? So in databases, so we have very well defined structure. We know what the different table is, what the schema is, what the the row and column and everything, what each one of the table will contain what kind of data, right? A lot of validation, a lot of stuff is is stored, and is everything is very well organized, very well kept, and a lot of validation. So you can't probably, enter your let's say phone number in the field of let's say your first name, and your maybe age in the second name and all that. So all those validations are in place. And this structured data is, most of the time you have the interfaces, web interfaces, which are, through which this data is being, interacted with, right, or entered or retrieved, right, and very well organized. So that is the structured data. And now, there's this semi-structured data. So this is a new term which has come up. So now, which is in the form of, now we have those XMLs and JSONs and, CSVs, in which, we have a lot of structured data, right, in some kind of a format, but it is not as structured as, which we have in our database, right? So that the term is called semi-structured, data, right? And the third one is the unstructured data. So which is being generated in, in a huge volume in the organization, which is in the form of, which is generated by a lot of, let's say, application like office productivity application, like your Word, Excel, PowerPoints, and, then you have your PDFs, and then you have your, let's say, log files, or your data, which is there on your websites, and then a lot of different forms, and, your audio, video files, and your emails and drawing files. And then there's a huge list of, the different unstructured file formats, which is there, right? And this unstructured data is actually, is creating the biggest worry of most of the organization, right? Because the structured data is still, to an extent, is manageable, and you can have a lot of access control, and it is residing at one central place. It is not scattered across, right? But this unstructured data, right, it can exist in multiple forms, right? So for example, you can export some data from the database in an Excel file, and then you can copy some of that content and put it in a Word file, and then you can create a PDF file out of that, and then maybe for a presentation you can use it in a PPT, right? Just imagine, same data, multiple formats, multiple different structures, and that's the reason it is, then it has been shared with a lot of inside and outsiders, to perform different business functions, right? And which is biggest worry point, right? And coming to, again, relating to the PII data, again, is exactly the similar situation, right? So the the PII data, so definitely there are applications through which it is entered, and then data is exported, and users are generating, and there's so many different formats. It exists in the enterprises, right? And now coming to the challenge. So this gentleman which you're seeing in the middle, you can name it a person who's responsible for the well-being of this so-called business critical data, or PII, or other sensitive data, right? So we can call him a CISO, we can call him a DPO, we can call him someone from a risk and compliance team, legal team, right? So they are are almost all the time so-called people who are worried, right? So what journey I call that is, these guys are on almost all the times are fighting what we call the two front wars, right? They are struggling with that. So on the one front, so they are managing a lot of compliances, right? There's so much compliances which they have to ensure that those compliances have been met with, and all the requirement of those compliances, the controls are, everything is in place, and there are no so-called NCs, right? And now, especially with more and more kind of new compliance regulation which are coming up, which are specific, sensitive, data specific, right? So the father of that has been GDPR, through which all this, the whole the focus on the PII started globally, right? And now following that, there are a lot of other regions have started working on that. And besides that, we have a lot of like regional ones like CCPAs or India's PDP bill, and then we have Singapore and Australia and Dubai and so on and so forth, right? So besides that, there are other compliances which are also related to individuals or sensitive data, like for example HIPAA, which talks about the PHI health information, right? And we have PCI, which talks about the card data, right, of the individuals who are handling the the card data, right? Credit card, debit card, through which transaction has been done, right? And so these guys have to continuously, they are worried about, they have to ensure that all the compliance requirements are met with, and ensuring that all their requirements and their all the clauses and all as per their instruction, all the implementations has been done, right? And the other front, of this war is on the control side, right? So they have been hearing a lot about these lot of breaches happening everywhere, and so they kind of fear about the kind of losses which are incurring, and even to the being a non-compliant of specific regulations, right? So what is the kind of fines which will be they have to bear, right? And just to share with you, I think some of you must have heard, last week there's a big data breach happened in Gurgaon, right, at Religare health insurance, right? Some of you must have heard about that. So there's those hackers, that data got breached, and there are about 5 million. They're saying the records which are being taken out, and and was available on the dark web, right? And they earlier they were refuting that nothing happened, but when they start publishing the data, and it was really shocking data, and then all the details were leaked, right? And so that means that some controls were not in place, and they become the news in the market, right? Okay, and definitely with my interaction with most of these gentlemen, as I'm saying, that be it we can call it DPO or CISOs or risk and compliance teams and all that, right? So during my interaction with a lot of this community, India and outside India and globally, right? So there's some common their struggling point which I have tried to consolidate and put it at one place, that I think almost all of them were struggling, and they wanted to get the answers for this, and they said if we can somehow get help in getting the answer to these our struggling points, these pain points, we'll be really happy, and we'll be able to do our job very, very effectively, right? The first one is that what PII data we have, right? So most of the time, right, they struggle to find out that what all sensitive data is there, because there are a lot of applications which have been defined, and there are a lot of business people are most of the time are aware of that, but they don't get most of the time that what exactly and how the data is getting collected, and what all data is getting, PII data is getting collected, right? Which all is there, and where it is, what it's been getting collected. So that means they said that we didn't get all those inputs from the business, right, very often, and right, and because as they don't know what all PII data is there, they said it's a really uphill task for us to then take any action on the protection of this PII data, right? Number two, where all this PII data is stored, right? So as I said, that because this data is lying in so many different formats, in structured, semi-structured, unstructured data formats, and where exactly, okay, to a structured data, they said that, okay, most of the time we have still, and we got this details from the application teams and the business that, okay, there's a database in which it is, lying, but what about unstructured data? So there's a lot of data which is exported out of, those structured data formats, and where all it has been kept, right? And how many different formats, which all system, whether the right people are accessing that data, where exactly, what is happening with that. They said we have no clue how this data is flowing and where it is stored. So we are totally, most of the time blind on that side, right? Who have access to the PII data, right? So is the relevant people who are supposed to have access to this data, are the one who are having access, or is it been some broken access, policies or the permissions, right, which has been assigned, right? And maybe this I have seen at one of the customer plays. So there's one person, they have he has exported a lot of the sensitive data, and to share it with one of the colleague, he just created a share on his own system and give it by default access, which was a full access to everyone, and put a file on that and tell his friend who's in different department, okay, this is how you can access this, and he forget to disable that share, and huge volume of the sensitive data was found when we did one of the audits, right? And it was no bad intention. There was, but it was just a broken process. They were not able to get the visibility that where this data is and what does the access, has been assigned to that sensitive data, right? Which are regulation and compliance I'm violating, right? So because, because of what all different sensitive data they have, right? So maybe, they are, the more than one different compliances, be it internal, be it contractual, be it external, or the government regulations, they must be violating, right? So they are, they feel that they are, they don't get all the information based on the data perspective, right? Based on the data, what is there in the organization. So they struggle to, get answer of that, right? And the lastly, and very, very, important is that what is my risk level, right? That means how much, because of any compliance or any other regulations, what is the risk level? Am I at low risk state? Am I at medium risk state, or I'm totally at a super highest risk state that the situation is pathetic, right? That means that it is data is sensitive, that is found everywhere, and so the whether that has been compromised and they have no clue, right? So they want to know that where do I stand as of now, right? What is my risk level current, right? On which I have to start, then taking my step forward to, taking some protective or corrective action to, reduce this risk, right? So they said that, the risk, knowing that what is my, current risk level is also very, very important. If you can get visibility of that what is my risk level, so I'll be able to, do a better job, or can plan, my data security program or data privacy program, that we can have effective controls in place, and we can get our risk level from, let's say, medium to low or high to low, or whatever the risk scoring or the risk level is going to be, right? So some of the questions which are bothering them, to a very, very large extent, right? Moving forward, so some of the challenges. So any question for me at this stage? I think let's make it more interactive. As Samir sir said that if any question you want to
Sukhpal, I have few points, but I thought that I am noting down those points, so at least I will ask at the end of the.
I think perfect. I think that'll be good. The way you feel forward, you want to ask me anytime, anybody. So you are welcome. No problems. Okay. So now I want to highlight. So we know what the challenge is. We know what are different kind of the data formats in which this data is residing in most of the enterprises: structured, semi-structured, unstructured, right? And now we know that they're definitely we have the people who are handling what all risks are there and what all challenges they are facing, right? And so now I'll probably try to share our approach, right? Which I call it a 5-stage approach, right? Which can be used to address or implement or build a very strong and effective data privacy framework, right? So what this approach, what all these 5 approaches this contain is that it starts with the first stage, which is the discovery stage. It moves to the data classification stage, data protection stage, the third one. The fourth one is the monitoring stage, and the fifth one is the automation stage, right? So these are the 5 stages, right? If we follow effectively, so we can build a very, very effective, our data privacy, framework, right? And I'll be now going into the detail of each and every stage. So the first one is the discover stage. Okay. So discover means the starting point, right? As they say that, you can't protect what you can't see, right? So till the time you don't know that what all PII data you have, right? You can't visualize it. You can't, create an inventory of, your PII data, right? And especially where exactly, it is there in the system. right? And so that you can, have it, your strategies, your, the actionables aligned to that. So you can't set up effective, your program in place, right? So it's very important to start with knowing what you have, right? So now, as I just mentioned, the start by knowing from the starting stage that how PI is collected, right? Starting from the point it is entering, right? That means how it is getting collected, which all applications are there, through which all interfaces it is getting collected, how it is getting, then where it is, residing, right? So that means whether it is getting stored in the form of, let's say, unstructured format, or whether it's getting stored in a, a structured format or a semi-structured format. It is very important to get that visibility, right? How it is getting, getting collected in our as organizations, the entire ecosystem, right? Especially, through which all applications it's getting collected, all right? And once it is collected, where it is getting stored, right? That means where it is actually going to reside in the, enterprise, right? And as I said, that in which all different formats, right? What is the format of PI data, right? So that means whether it's a structured, unstructured, or semi-structured. So what is the format of this PI data, right? And what is the sensitivity of this PI data, right? As you all know that we have this different sensitivity levels of the, our so-called PD. We have SPD and we have CPD, and all the different sensitivity of classification levels defined on that, right? What it contains that make it sensitive, right? And aligning to that, does it contain, a CPD, or does it contain SPD, or does it contain only specific, PD part, right? So what is there, which it is there, which is making it, sensitive, right? And these are some of the questions, very, very relevant. So if we start, working on getting the answers of that in the stage one as a step one, right? And then it will be, a very smooth journey to, moving forward on this, right? What is the classification? Who all have access to this, right? So it is not only important to know that where this data is residing and how it is getting collected, but it's very important to know who all have access to that. Once you know where it is residing, so you'll also get that what are the access controls, which has been configured and enforced on that, right? And how people are accessing it, right? Is everybody can access it when they are accessing? What is the level of, what is the form in which they will access, right? Whether they're able to access in an unprotected way or in a protected data format. So, sir, you.
Sukhpal, yeah, I have a question, Sukhpal.
Yeah, please.
So the other questions I will ask you at the end, they were not so relevant. In the first point, you say how PI data is collected.
Yeah.
Now, you must be aware, and that is this upcoming law, PDP, we have a concept of a consent manager, which means Absolutely. That before you collect the data. So are you saying that you have some form of including the concept of consent manager, or you have kept it on side that this is not under classifies domain? Is it, yeah. You got my question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I got your question. So, Samir sir, this is the moment it comes to the consent manager, right? So, this is generally consent is taken when the data is being, entered. For example, I am as an individual, I'm going to, let's say, some insurance site, right?
Correct.
And I'm entering my details, right? So at that time, right, it's the responsibility of that so-called, I'll say that data, controller of fiduciary to, properly work on the data consent manager. And we can fetch the data in our platform, so, then map it to the data and saying that for this data, user has given a consent. For this data, there's no consent, right?
Correct.
And, those kind of alignment.
See, now, there is no question of no consent now. Without consent, it cannot be processed.
Absolutely.
So my question, your answer is that your product does not look into the consent part, which is right, which is the right thing. So I just wanted to clarify that consent is not included this here, right?
Yeah.
The other question was that in the previous slide, you mentioned about definition of personal data
Yeah.
And personal data. You said that is a big confusion with the users, that what all is PII.
Yeah.
Now, I think very soon with this non-personal data also being introduced, I mean, of course, it's not going to change into a law, get into a law soon, but you might have to, just an idea that you might have to actually include non-personal data also in somewhere in your software,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And the third point I wanted to add was, I mean, that's not a question also, that you mentioned about Religare Health, Religare Insurance not reporting a breach. In the upcoming law, that not reporting a breach is a
Absolutely.
major, non-compliance, and I think that is taken care of. So I'm
Absolutely.
happy that whatever points you are raising, we are able to kind of connect it to whatever Naavi sir has taught us in the
Right.
last 4 or 5 months.
Right.
So that was my point. Please go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Thank you so much, Sir. I think very valid point. I definitely the consent. So I'm not here to talk about our product, but we have done, sir, in some format when a user is generating a data, right, or in the organization, right, even though I'll deviate a bit. So in the different states of the data, right? So we call that data at rest, data in use, and in data in motion. These are the three states in which the data exists in the an enterprise, right? So when data is in use is happening, so we have in our applications we have the included the option of taking the consent, wherein user can select the option and give his consent that yes, this whatever the new data he's generated, it has some PII in it, and so that it can be tagged with the data, and then your whole ecosystem can work on it, and you can have some automation and some action taken on that. Right. Okay, so I was just talking about the who all have access and what is the actually classification, right? And the whole objective is to get the complete the content and context visibility, right, from the PIA perspective. It's very important. So the content is from again the PIA data, and the context, right? So which all other questions, where it is exactly, who's this created it, whose data it belongs to, which systems, which application, where it is stored. So that context is very important to so that effectively effective security controls can be required, and it can be those kind of decision can be taken very effectively, that what is the now level of protection is required to safeguard that data. Okay. The second stage is what we call as classification stage, right? So it is all about defining the sensitivity of the PII data, right? So it's all about attaching that context to the data. So what is the sensitivity of this PII, right? So in which category it belongs to? Is it so-called is a PD, or when is a SPD, or it is a CPD, or now I was as what I read also is it that there's a separate provision. I think Naavi sir is the right person. So there's a separate provision which they are doing for the children PD also, right? So
Yes, that's right. Yes.
yeah. So which is also and there's a separate there's something called a guardian data controller, something like that, right? So this is what is actually the category or sensitivity of this PII, right? So they can't say it's a PII. So they have to define whether it's a PD or a SPD or a CPD, or it's a children PD, right? So it is very important to have that segregation done, right? And because every kind of this PD has to be treated differently, right? And because there are some control that PD can be sent out of the country, and but SPD and CPD can't be sent and without consent, and so on and so forth. So you must have already read about that part. So what is this PI's criticality, right? So criticality is that what will happen if this goes out, right? And also is from the criticality, what this mean is that, so there must be a document, or there might be a document which has, let's say, only one individual's data, right? So, or there must be a document or some document which may have 100 individuals PII, or there must be document which has, let's say, thousands of users PII, right? So what is the criticality? What is the risk level of this specific PII, right? So that means if it get breached, so what will be the impact to the organizations to overall risk on that, right? So classify this PII. So as I said, that based on different classification level, right? So based on PD, SPD, it's very important to attach or do the segregation of this PDI, or attach this, if possible, attach this kind of a persistent markings to this, wherever this data or whichever different format this data is there, so that it is very easy to identify that with specific the unstructured data or structured data which have that the specific the PI information, right? Then these are the different ways in which it can be done. So it can be a user-driven classification, or a suggested classification, or an automated classification. So these are more of different options which can be considered, right? So when doing the classification, that means now a lot of these intelligence has been been developed in the different application, including the one which we are developing, Classify, which can on the fly identify the PII in a specific data set, right? So we can identify that whether it contain PD or SPD or a CPD or any children specific PD, right? So it can and automatically flag it, automatically tag it, automatically do the segregation of a PII data from the non-PII data, right? So because it is very important to have that segregation, that what is PII and what is non-PII, so that where you have to focus on, or what is under your scope and what is not under your scope, right? It's very, very important to put the focus on, because there's something which is not under scope. There's no point keeping that with you and not protecting. That's the reason probably the next stage when we go. So there's a lot of protection control which are built into that. So involve the end users, right? So the end user is that the moment we are doing it. So even there are options wherein you can, as Samir sir said, that taking the consent or taking the consent to a next level, whether you're also taking the consent from your user, that whether it contain PD or SPD or a CPD or any chip, right? Take the consent from the involve the user, so that they are aware that from the moment they are sharing their PII, that what exactly they are sharing, all right? And then how it has to be treated, and even then organization also know who's collecting and who's the fiduciary, that how it has to be, what kind of information with the users are sharing and what category it belongs to, right? And make user accountable to consent, right?
So Paul, I have a query. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, please, sir. Please. No problem.
When you're saying you're automating the classification of the PII, which means that you are reading data.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe you and the other people here can help clarify this point, that as a vendor, see, Classify is a third-party vendor to an organization. And if they are reading my data to define whether it's a CPD, SPD, is that fine with organizations? Naavi sir, Dr. Goyal, Ramesh sir, I'm reading out names as they are coming. Is that fine if as an organization, my data is being read by a vendor software to define whether it's SPD or CPD? Naavi sir?
It depends on see whether the consent has been taken by the software, because the software ultimately reflects an entity. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So if this software actually runs on my computer and does not send out the data, that's one situation. Okay. If the data goes out to Classify server and gets processed there, they become actually a subcontracting processor. Absolutely. And I will have to handle it as a contract. They will have the liability in terms of securing the data. Okay.
Okay.
So
Absolutely.
but
I think
they
Naavi
will
sir
not.
has nailed it. So exactly, Naavi sir, the way you have explained is exactly the way we are doing. Samir sir, what we are doing is that, so we are, touching the data, right, at its source and do the analysis and, and just understand and reflect it back that what is it, it contains, and all the information resides, in the control of the the enterprise, right?
No, but Sukhpal, in terms of going back to Navi sir's point, is it residing at? I'm sure you have a cloud-based offering. It's
No,
a
we don't
SaaS-based
have.
offering.
We don't
You
have.
don't
It
have.
is. It
Okay.
is.
Okay.
Yeah. That is one of the reason. So that
Okay.
and from that perspective, so we are not collecting any data. So we are collecting the telemetry, right? So that means that we are probably will read the content and then we'll tell you that there's a I have found one file which is on, let's say, Samir's system. It is lying in the C folder. This is the
Yeah.
file name. This was created on this date, and it contain PD and SPD. Whether it contain SPD or it contain CPD, we'll classify that in that way, and we'll
No,
say
but then
that
you will
what is the
classify
risk
after
level.
reading it only, right? You will.
Absolutely.
So you're talking
So
of metadata, or you are talking of?
Vinny, we are talking
Please,
about
please.
actual content. You can't get anything from the metadata. It's actual content.
Please. Somebody was speaking.
uh,
Yeah, please.
yeah,
please.
Samir, my understanding is at the time of collecting the data, many of the regulations clearly specifies that you need to be provide the person who is giving the data at the time of collection itself what we call it as notice to be provided. The
Yes.
notice is the one which clearly specifies that, hey, look, I am going to collect the PII data, and number one. Number two, how am I going to process this data? Where am I going to store this
Store
data?
data,
With
absolutely.
whom I might be sharing the data, etc. So this part, what we are talking about, is clearly getting addressed at the time of collection, and the notice has been provided. Option has been given to the user whether to go ahead in giving the data or not to giving the data. Okay, so my understanding is that more or less the classification of the data and educating the user has been already given, and hence there is no violation by the organization while classifying the data internally as part of the tool or as part of the process in reading the data, because you already have a consent from him, you educated him. Uh,
Very valid point, Ramesh sir. But my point is that in this case, classifies case, see, I collected the data today, and after 2 years, I bought Classify as a tool to let's say discover and classify and automate the data. At the time of consent, I I did not know that I'm going to use Classify as a tool, and I'm going to give access to your data, to employee data, to a third party called Classify. I didn't know Classify at that time, so I bought Classify after 2 years after
no, no.
collection of data. So at that time, the notice and whatever consent was taken that we will process your data, and obviously in a secure manner. My question was that giving access to data to a third party, is that fine? I mean, you have answered the question, but I'm still saying that I see some gray area there.
No. 1 minute. If you are talking about in today's context where
Yeah.
from GDPR's emergencies in 2018, I
Correct.
think this question has been already addressed without any ambiguity from my perspective. Okay,
Okay.
because probably if you're talking about a legacy system, that too, again it has been given time to the organizations to reclassify, classify. If you did not get the consent because you did not have the process at the time, go back to them, get it, everything. So I think, in my opinion, the baseline is set.
Hmm.
There is no ambiguity per se today. Okay, if your
Okay.
tool is not,
Fine.
yeah, I
Fine.
think, am I right, sir? Navi sir?
I
No,
think
no,
I
fine.
could add, the one thing we have to remember in this particular case is
Yeah.
this Classify or any such tool is not simply a let us say a software service provider, either as a tool or software as a service. He becomes a data processor for me.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because he has got access to data. He is a data processor, so I need to have a data processor contract. Now,
Agreement.
notice
Yes.
consent which you are talking of, if it provides that I may share the data with
Which means, Navi sir, which means that I'm just asking you that if I buy Classify I am a data fiduciary, and if I apply classify, I have to inform DPA that now I am going to sign a contract with a company called Classify.
Say, you may have to think internally at least to do a DPIA if you are paying this. Okay, then if under the DPIA impact assessment, if you feel that there is no risk, then you can go ahead, provided the consent has got some reference to this type of processors. You know, when we take a consent, we don't take a consent making a particular person or a company in question.
Correct.
Well, if the consent has been taken with a well-worded words that we may share it with the processors for the purpose of classification, discovery, etc., then this automatically comes there. But one point which we need to remember is, in case Classify has to store the data elsewhere, that is, let's say outside India, it becomes a cross-border transfer. Of course, PDPB does not have any issue. But if a GDPR client is using this kind of a particular software, then cross-border transfer may happen from the country of origin to India. So that issue also has to be handled, because that cannot be as easily handled as other forms of consent, because explicit consent will be required if data has to be transferred out of the EU region to India, because India is not an adequacy country. So the user will be required to identify that when I buy this product, I am actually appointing a data processor, and accordingly handle the issue.
Correct. Very good. Mr. Kudandram, you were saying something. Mr. Kudandram, yes.
I have one thing to add. Even data processor has been mentioned as a person who should register and comply with the law. If you look at, there is not only a fiduciary, processor also is there. So fiduciary is responsibility to the fiduciary, to processor, and processor to fiduciary. Both of them are registrant. They are parallelly available, and both of them are compliant to the DPA. So, and therefore, there should not be any worry towards this, provided when I, as a fiduciary, when I want to process it, that person must be a kind of a recognized processor, duly approved by the DPA. That's all.
Correct, sir.
What I would like Mr. Sukhpal to think of is, presently they will be having a agreement which is mostly directed towards the software usage, okay, terms of usage, EULA or whatever is that.
Right, sir.
But it should have a data protection related issue from the point which we are discussing, where actually whether you are only going to be a data processor or a joint controller or a joint processor, fiduciary is also to be thought of, because if you are the person who is perhaps defining how and what purpose the data is being processed, you may become a joint controller also. So,
in other words, Sukhpal, you need to hire FDPI to give you consulting on advisory on this.
I'm going to be part of it anyway. So Naavi sir, I'll be happy to work with all of you. And
Naavi, I have just a point, Naavi sir.
Please.
So this is Ramesh Kauta. This is generally a generic one. I see two situations here. One, if I'm using Classify for my internal use within the organization, versus if I'm a service provider and offering it something else, so some to outside people processing the other's data, I think the situation differs in terms of how the data is being classified and used. For one reason, internally, if I'm using for myself, I think I myself, if I buy the license and keep it with me, I myself will become the processor as well, right? Because I'm not.
Correct. That is, in case the data doesn't go out. But I think what Sukhpal was describing, at least after we started the discussion, data is actually processed under the control of Classify. If it happens, then the data is going out. Even in the case of if you want to use it.
Naavi sir, in our scenario, the data, this application is installed in the customer, as Sandhu was rightly saying,
but access
stays within the organization.
But access is provided to you, no?
No. We don't have. It's just like a software. I think he very rightly said It is in your control. You have the access, just a software, right? Get deployed in your data center and you have the complete control of it. And we have no, it's not a cloud base. So that's, what I was saying.
That's
you have
fine.
the full control of that.
That is the clarification. That is the clarification. If
Very good.
classify is not going to have access to the data, then it's okay. I think out of your enthusiasm, you said we will do this. We will do this. I think you are collecting the software. You are identifying yourself with the software. So use the term that we will view it and kind of a thing. I think that
is software applications are
right.
Yeah.
So Sukhpal, you have 10 more minutes.
So, I'll quickly
please go through.
And the third stage is the protection part, because again, as the PDP, it's very important to know that what data, how the data has to be stored, how PD or CPD has to be done, right? So there's a concept of anonymizations, right? So which is a kind of a non-retrievable data, right? And then we have the what we called tokenization or pseudomization, right? Which talk about replicating the data with similar the content. For example, if it is a Samir written in the first name rather than Samir, I'll write XYZ MY, so that if I need to process this data, right, and rather than I do anonymize and I put XXXX. So definitely the that processing or some kind of analysis which has to be done, right, it will not be possible. So there are different methods through which the data can be protected, right? We have encryption, we have access controls, like applying rights, for example, rights management. I know a couple of customers who are doing that, the rights management on their PII, so that only a restricted set of people can access it. They can only view it, they can't print it, they can't if this data is being copied and shared with some other unauthorized person, so they will not be able to open that data, right? So those access controls which are needed to to protect the data. And then lastly, the data erasure, because it talk about the rights of the the data principal to have this right of erasure if he just want to don't want to have data processor to have the access of data. So there are different options, right? And the next stage is the monitoring part. So it's very important to also keep a monitor that how your PIA is flowing, right? So how who is accessing it? Who are the probably the risky users, right? Who are the risky system? Which are the risky departments, right? So it will help you. It's very important to keep a monitoring on the violation which are happening, right? If people are not handling it properly, or if there's some data which has not been protected, right, and it is as per the requirement or as per the requirement of the regulation, right? It's very important to know that where exactly this unprotected so-called PIA is residing. So I'll give an example of, like, for example, if some of you must be having some experience of interacting with PCI data, right? So which is PCI DSS, so which talks about that all the card holders data has to be wherever it is lying, whether it is lying in structured, unstructured, semi-structured, it has to be protected. So protected means they have very well defined the guideline. They said that if it's a 16-digit number, so at the max you can show first 6 and last 4, rest all these data has to be masked, right? So that it can be nobody can misuse it, even though they are going to somehow someone can copy that, and that protected data is also then been considered as a out of the scope. And in the case of Indian PDP bill also, right, and it is they said that the data which is protected, which is in anonymized, right, it is out of the scope of the law. It is going to be out of the scope, right? But which is being the tokenized or pseudonymized, right, so that data will still be in the scope, right? Because the data can be regenerated, or you can still guess, or you can you can still find some reference on that, right? But if you have already anonymized, so that is straightforwardly out of the scope of the law, and you are safe. So organization definitely has to have a continuous eye and monitoring the data which has been protected, which has been which is not protected, right? So that who's handling and all that. So it's very important to have that monitoring stage, right? And the last one, very, very importantly, is that, the need of the automation, right? It is very important to have that, the built-in the ecosystem. That means which will automate, right? That the moment data is getting generated in whatever state, right? So whether it's a data at rest, data in use, and data in motion. So it is very important to have some kind of automation which will do a discovery, classification, and protection of, the PII. So the moment it is generated, the moment it is identified, so it is very important to have that automation. The moment it's a PII, is identified. So now whether it is you want to anonymize it, or whether you want to, whether it has to be classified as a PD or a CPD or a SPD or a, other forms, right? So, and based on that, right? So you want to also have to ensure that whether you want to anonymize it, or you want to, let's say erase it, or you want to, tokenize it, or you want to apply the rights on that so that specific people can access that. So it's very important to have that. Then, the maturity level to, increase it to the, totally automation, system, wherein all this process then become automated and, start giving the desired results, on
Very
the
good,
fly,
very
right?
good.
So this is.
Well, I have a lot of questions,
please.
but I feel that
I think I'm almost done. So I think I have one slide. Let me quickly.
Please.
I'll even though we have already crossed. So I can share this deck with all of you. So I'll share it to Samir sir, and Samir sir, up to you, Naavi sir. So so it's also, privacy should address, even though I have addressed that what PI is sensitive, why it needs classification, who should have access to it, how it should be used, when the classification change, and where the data should be stored. So the program should, help you address these, question of all these questions. And last now, apni ad bhi kar dete hain thodi si, so I had to classify. So we have this platform, so which is, is a classify data discovery and data classification platform, which has been, built on this 5 we called pillars, or 5 stages of the the whole ecosystem, right? And which is it's been used by a lot of financial institutions, a lot of banks, ITITS, and there's a lot more traction is happening on that. So my credentials, so I think I'll be happy to interact, and I'll be very soon. Would love to be a part of. I'll request Naavi sir, please let us know how we can join you and
sure.
learn on that.
Thank you, Sukhpal. Sukhpal, I was saying that there are a lot of questions I have, but
Please,
I
sir.
feel that not today, sometime I would like to see a demo of the product, a brief demo, 15-20 minutes.
Sure.
So because seeing it on the PPT, more and more questions are coming. For example, automating, how do you automate? For the Sanyogita is asking in the chat window. Sanyogita is a very senior professional based out of Pune and working with Converges. Sanyogita, correct me if I'm wrong. How will
Capgemini, Samir, Capgemini.
Capgemini. Okay. She's asking how will unstructured data, example, mails be classified?
Yeah. Okay. I think, Sangeeta, this is a very, very technical question. I think, as Samir sir said, so what we are doing is that, so our platform, the moment, users are going to generate a new mail send, so the platform can analyze and then do the classification of that. It's very much possible. But as time is not allowing, so I can't demonstrate. Otherwise, I think, as Samir sir said, we can have a separate session wherein use cases live demonstration we can keep, and so that you actually, from the user experience or from the consultant experience or from the administrator experience, so we can.
To answer Sanyogita's query, Sukhpal, you are saying it is possible.
Yes.
Right? You are saying mails can be classified.
Mail, document, all the majority of the unstructured data, right? And mail is one form of unstructured data, and definitely you can do the classification of that.
Okay, very good. So I would like to see a demo. I will put a query in the group. Whosoever interested can join.
Yeah.
Anybody has any question, Doctor?
Yeah, Samir, one question.
Please.
Sir, just want to understand, when we are classifying the data, do you also have the provision to associate against each data under what regulation it comes under? For example, if that organization is had to adhere to 2 to 3 regulations like CCPA, GDPR, do you have the provision here?
Absolutely. I think you have just nailed it, sir. So what we are doing is that as there's a specific data, right? For example, what we have done is that we have developed a different data identifiers, right? So, for example, GDPR definitely all the European citizens' data, right? Because individual countries' passport details or other their PII, whether it's their other social security numbers and all that, they all have different formats, right? And that can be identified whether in a US specific CCPAs and Australian, so all are different. So we have already done that categorization, wherein that respective data can be mapped to the respective regulation to which it belongs.
Then I have a corresponding question. Thanks that addressing it. For example, yeah, great. For example, let's say the GDPR has given a kind of today 20 categories under PII. Tomorrow, for any reason, the regulation goes for updation, and if they're reducing it or taking it more, how will you update back? Because it's a standalone system you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think it's a very, very valid question. So see, these all absolutely right. For example, they might say that, okay, date of birth is not PII, just for the hypothetical example, right? Or they might say passport is not PII, right? So as of now, we are giving them the visibility of that, right? And when they are going to scan it, when you're going to scan this data, so you can include and exclude those identifiers.
Okay.
So in your next scan, you can exclude passport number of, let's say, maybe in, let's say, GDPR, right? So next inventory, when it will going to do the scan, it will identify rest of the stuff, but it will not, identify, even though passport number is there, it will ignore it and say that this is not PII and
or Sukhpal, in case there is a major change in the law in terms of including some new category, you might have to come out with, I'm sure you are coming out with updates.
Yeah, absolutely. That is happening very often. Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah,
it has
as I said that we have got a request yesterday only for the including of Bahrain. Bahrain has come up, and there's a friend there. He said that the guy said, boss, we haven't included that, but we'll definitely, if you can share those, they are also into this consulting stuff there. So we can build it and give them a patch. Regularly updates are there. Definitely that's happening.
Thanks, Sukhpal sir. Great session. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So if Sukhpal, you are done with the session, right?
Yeah, I'm done, sir. I'm done.
So thank you very much, Sukhpal. And if nobody has a question, then we can end the session today. And on behalf of FDPI, we'd like to thank Sukhpal for sparing his time and giving us all this knowledge. And